Emma Adelaide was 30 feet up in the cottonwood when she saw him coming across the valley, a massive figure moving with deliberate purpose through the late afternoon heat of August 1878, and something in her chest tightened like a fist. She adjusted her position on the branch, her worn leather boots finding purchase on the bark as she leaned forward to get a better look. The stranger was still a good mile off, leading a pack mule behind his horse, but even from this distance she could tell he was built like the mountains themselves, broad-shouldered and tall. Emma had been climbing trees since she was old enough to walk, much to her mother's horror and her father's secret amusement, and from her vantage point high above the Adelaide ranch, she could see most everything that moved across the New Mexico landscape. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the desert scrub golden and making the distant peaks shimmer with heat. Emma wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of dirt across her sun-bronzed skin. She was 22 years old and had been managing her father's ranch since he had taken ill 3 years prior, a responsibility that left little time for the feminine pursuits her mother had once hoped she would embrace. Instead, Emma spent her days riding fence lines, breaking horses, and yes, climbing trees to survey the land and watch for trouble. And this stranger looked like he might be trouble, though not necessarily the dangerous kind. He moved with the confidence of a man who belonged to the wilderness, who had carved out a life in places where civilization feared to tread. Emma felt her heart beat faster, though she told herself it was merely curiosity. She scrambled down the tree with practiced ease, her hands knowing exactly where to grip, her feet finding every foothold without conscious thought. Her faded workshirt was untucked from her denims, her dark blonde hair escaping from the braid that hung down her back. She dropped the last 8 feet and landed in a crouch, then straightened and dusted off her hands. The house stood another 100 yards away, a low adobe structure with a tin roof that her grandfather had built when he first claimed this land. Her mother would be inside preparing supper, and her father would be resting in his chair by the window, his once robust frame diminished by the wasting sickness that had slowly stolen his strength. Emma hesitated, torn between warning them of the approaching stranger and intercepting him herself. She chose the latter, walking with long strides toward the main path that led to their property. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Dust rose beneath her boots, and she could hear the distant lowing of their cattle settling in for the evening. The stranger was closer now, and Emma felt her breath catch as she got her first clear look at him. He was indeed massive, probably 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that strained against his buckskin shirt. His hair was dark brown and hung past his collar, held back from his face by a strip of leather tied across his forehead. His jaw was strong and covered with several days' worth of beard, and even from 20 yards away, she could see the way his muscles moved beneath his clothes as he handled his horse. He noticed her standing in the path and reined in his mount, studying her with eyes that were a startling shade of blue-gray, like the sky before a storm. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Emma lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated by his size or the wild, untamed look of him. "This is Adelaide land," she called out, her voice steady. "Can I help you with something?" The stranger swung down from his horse with fluid grace despite his size, and Emma found herself taking an involuntary step backward before she caught herself. He was even more impressive on foot, all lean muscle and coiled strength. He removed his hat, revealing more of that long dark hair, and she noticed the way the sun had weathered his face, marking him as a man who lived outdoors more than in. "Name is Jacob Grant," he said, and his voice was deep and rough, like gravel shifting in a stream. "I'm looking for work if you are in need of hands. I can work cattle, break horses, build or repair most anything. I do not require much in the way of payment, just enough to see me through the winter." Emma studied him carefully. They could use the help, Lord knew they could. Since her father had fallen ill, they had been down to just 2 hired men, both of them getting on in years. The ranch was suffering for lack of strong backs and skilled hands, but there was something about this Jacob Grant that made her cautious, made her aware of herself in ways she had not been in years. "You're coming from the mountains?" she asked, noting the pack on his mule, the quality of his gear. Everything about him spoke of competence and self-sufficiency. "I have been trapping up north for the past 5 years," Jacob said. "Before that, I lived in the high country of Colorado. I'm looking to settle somewhere for a season, Earn enough to buy some land of my own come spring. Emma noticed the way his eyes kept drifting past her toward the tree she had just descended, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. He must have seen her up there, must think her strange for climbing like a child instead of behaving like a proper woman. "You saw me," she said, not quite a question. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, transforming his rugged features into something almost boyish. "I did. I thought perhaps there was a mountain cat in that tree, the way you moved through those branches. Then I got closer and realized my mistake." Emma did not know whether to be offended or pleased by the comparison. "I was checking the water levels in the north pasture," she said defensively. "You can see the creek from up there." "Makes sense," Jacob said, and there was no mockery in his tone, only genuine interest. "Better than riding all that way in this heat. Smart." No one had ever called her tree climbing smart before. Emma felt something shift inside her chest, a small opening of possibility. She cleared her throat, trying to regain her composure. "I would need to speak with my father about hiring you on," she said. "But I will be honest with you, Mr. Grant. He's been ill for some time. The decisions about the ranch mostly fall to me now. If you can prove yourself worth the investment, I can offer you $30 a month plus room and board." Jacob's eyebrows rose slightly. "You run this place?" Emma bristled, ready for the inevitable criticism, the suggestion that a woman could not possibly manage a ranch. But Jacob was nodding slowly, his expression thoughtful rather than dismissive. "That explains the way you were surveying the land from up high," he said, "keeping watch over your domain. How many acres?" 1,500, Emma said, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "We run about 300 head of cattle, plus horses. Most of the land is grazing, but we have good water from the creek and 2 wells. And how many men do you have working the place?" 2, besides myself, Walt and Henry. They are good men, but they are both past 60. We need someone with strength and stamina, someone who is not afraid of hard work." Jacob's smile widened, and Emma felt her stomach flutter in response. "I have never been afraid of hard work, Miss Adelaide. If you are willing to give me a chance, I promise you will not regret it." Emma made a decision then, one that felt both reckless and right. "Follow me," she said. "I will introduce you to my parents, and we will see about getting you settled in the bunkhouse." She turned and started walking toward the house, intensely aware of Jacob leading his horse and mule behind her. She could feel his presence like a physical weight, and she found herself walking straighter, more conscious of the swing of her hips, the way her braid moved against her back. It had been a long time since she had felt like anything other than a ranch manager, a caretaker, a daughter watching her father slowly fade. This stranger made her remember she was also a woman, and the realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Her mother met them at the door, wiping her hands on her apron. Margaret Adelaide was a small, delicate woman who had somehow survived 30 years in the harsh New Mexico territory, though she had never quite accepted the wildness of it. Her eyes widened when she saw Jacob, taking in his size and rough appearance with barely concealed alarm. "Mama, this is Jacob Grant," Emma said quickly. "He is looking for work, and I think we should hire him on." "Emma," her mother hissed, pulling her aside, "you cannot simply bring strange men to the house. What will people think? And look at him. He is practically a savage." Emma glanced back at Jacob, who was standing patiently in the yard, holding his hat in his hands. In the golden light of the setting sun, he looked like something out of a legend, a figure from the old stories about mountain men who wrestled bears and crossed the Rockies alone. But she also saw the quiet respect in the way he waited, the careful distance he maintained, the way he kept his eyes averted from their private conversation. "Mama, we need help," Emma said firmly. "Papa cannot work anymore, and Walt and Henry cannot do everything themselves. Mr. Grant has experience with cattle and horses. We would be foolish to turn him away." "Your father should make this decision," her mother insisted, but there was defeat in her voice. They both knew her father was in no condition to interview potential ranch hands. Emma gave her mother's hand a squeeze. "I will speak with Papa, but I think this is the right choice." She left her mother at the door and approached Jacob again. "Wait here," she told him. "I will be back in a moment." Inside the house, the air was cooler, but carried the smell of sickness and medicine that had become so familiar. Her father sat in his chair by the window, a blanket across his lap despite the heat. Frank Adelaide had once been a bear of a man, strong and vital, but illness had whittled him down to bones and sinew. His eyes, however, were still sharp, and they focused on Emma as she entered. "Who is the man outside?" he asked, his voice thin and reedy. "His name is Jacob Grant. He's a mountain man, Papa. He's been trapping up north but wants to settle down for a season. He is looking for work, and I think we should hire him." Her father studied her face for a long moment. "You trust him?" Emma thought about the question carefully. She barely knew Jacob Grant, had spoken to him for only a few minutes. But there had been something in his eyes, in the way he had spoken to her without condescension or mockery, that had resonated with her. "I think he is a good man," she said finally. "And we need the help, Papa. You know we do." Frank nodded slowly. "Then hire him, daughter. Your judgment has always been sound. Just be careful. A man who has lived alone in the mountains for 5 years might have forgotten how to live among civilized folk." "Yes, Papa," Emma said, leaning down to kiss his weathered cheek. "I will be careful." She returned outside to find her mother had brought Jacob a cup of water, though she maintained a wary distance. Jacob drank gratefully, then handed the cup back with a quiet, "Thank you." "Mr. Grant, we would like to offer you a position here at the Adelaide Ranch," Emma said formally. $30 a month, room and board included. You will work alongside Walt and Henry, our 2 regular hands. The days are long and the work is hard, but we treat our people fairly." Something flickered in Jacob's eyes, something that might have been relief or gratitude or both. "I accept," he said, "and I promise you, Miss Adelaide, I will earn every penny." "I expect you will," Emma replied. "Come on, I will show you to the bunkhouse and introduce you to Walt and Henry." The bunkhouse was a long, low building, made of the same adobe as the main house. Inside it was simple but clean, with 4 beds, a pot-bellied stove, and a rough wooden table with chairs. Walt and Henry were just coming in from the evening chores, both of them moving with the careful stiffness of men whose bodies had given everything to a hard life. "Walt, Henry, this is Jacob Grant," Emma announced. "He will be working with you starting tomorrow." Walt, who was tall and lean with a drooping mustache, looked Jacob up and down with open curiosity. Henry, shorter and rounder with kind eyes, broke into a welcoming smile. "About time we got some young blood around here," Henry said, extending his hand. "No offense to you, Walt." "None taken," Walt said dryly, also shaking Jacob's hand. "Lord knows my back has been complaining about doing the work of 3 men." Emma felt some of the tension leave her body. Walt and Henry were good men, and if they accepted Jacob, that was a strong recommendation. "I will leave you gentlemen to get acquainted," she said. "Jacob, we start work at dawn. Someone will ring the bell for breakfast at 5:30. "I will be ready," Jacob assured her. Emma walked back to the house as twilight settled over the ranch. The sky was deepening to purple, and the first stars were beginning to appear. She should have felt relieved to have secured help for the ranch, should have been thinking about work schedules and task assignments. Instead, her mind kept returning to the way Jacob had looked at her, the way he had called her smart for climbing trees, the way his presence had made her feel aware of herself as a woman for the first time in years. She shook her head, trying to clear it. Jacob Grant was an employee, nothing more. She could not afford to be distracted by a handsome face and broad shoulders, no matter how much they might make her heart race. But as she lay in bed that night, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling for the evening, she found herself thinking about the mountain man who had walked into her life. She wondered what had driven him down from the high country, what dreams he held of owning his own land, what kind of man could survive 5 years alone in the wilderness. And she wondered, with a flutter of something that felt dangerously like hope, what it might mean that he had come to her ranch at this particular moment in her life. Sleep was a long time coming. The bell rang at 5:30 sharp, just as Emma had promised, and the ranch came to life in the pre-dawn darkness. Emma was already up, had been for an hour, helping her mother prepare the enormous breakfast that would fuel the men through a long day of labor. Biscuits, bacon, eggs, and strong black coffee filled the kitchen with warmth and good smells. Jacob was the first to arrive at the main house, his hair still damp from washing, his face freshly shaved. Emma felt her mouth go dry at the sight of him. Without the several days' growth of beard, she could see the strong lines of his jaw, the fullness of his lips. He looked younger than she had initially thought, probably only a few years older than herself, but his eyes held the kind of wisdom, that came from hard living and self-reliance. "Morning, Miss Adelaide," he said, removing his hat as he entered. "Something smells mighty good." "Good morning, Mr. Grant," Emma replied, forcing herself to focus on pouring coffee. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," he admitted. "It has been a long time since I had a real bed under a solid roof." Walt and Henry arrived moments later, and the four of them settled around the big kitchen table. Margaret Adelaide served the food with practiced efficiency, though she still eyed Jacob with a mixture of wariness and fascination. Emma noticed the way her mother's gaze kept returning to the sheer size of him, the way his presence seemed to fill the room. "So, Jacob," Walt said around a mouthful of biscuit, "Emma says you have been trapping up north. Where exactly?" "Mostly Colorado territory, up near the Continental Divide," Jacob said. "I had a cabin about a day's ride from the nearest settlement. Good beaver country, some marten and fox as well." "Must have been lonely," Henry observed. Jacob shrugged his massive shoulders. "I liked the solitude for a time. But a man can only talk to himself in the trees for so long before he starts to miss human company. I decided it was time to come back to civilization, at least for a while." "And you want to buy land?" Emma asked, genuinely curious. "That is the plan," Jacob confirmed. "I have saved most of what I have earned over the past 5 years. By spring I should have enough to buy a good piece of property, maybe start raising cattle of my own. Nothing as grand as this place, but enough to build something lasting." There was a wistfulness in his voice that touched Emma's heart. She understood the desire to build something, to put down roots and create a legacy. It was what her grandfather had done, what her father had expanded, and what she was now fighting to preserve. "That is a good dream," she said softly, and their eyes met across the table. For a moment, the rest of the room seemed to fade away. Emma felt caught in the intensity of Jacob's gaze, in the unspoken understanding that passed between them. Then Walt cleared his throat loudly, breaking the spell, and Emma quickly looked away, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Well, we had better get to work," she said briskly, standing up. "Jacob, I thought you could start by helping Walt repair the fence in the south pasture. Some of the posts rotted through during the spring rains, and we need to get them replaced before the cattle decide to wander." "Sounds good," Jacob said, rising to his feet. Even standing, Emma only came up to the middle of his chest, and she had to tilt her head back to look at him. He seemed to realize the disparity and took a small step back, giving her space. "I am at your disposal, Miss Adelaide." The men headed out into the growing light, and Emma watched them go from the kitchen window. She could see Jacob's broad back, the easy way he moved despite his size, the way Walt was already talking animatedly, probably filling him in on the ranch's history and quirks. "He seems like a decent sort," her mother said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "Though I still say you should be careful, Emma. A man like that, used to being alone, might have wild ways." "I can handle myself, Mama," Emma said, but there was no sharpness in her tone. "Besides, we need him. You know we do." Her mother sighed, wrapping an arm around Emma's waist. "I know, daughter. I just worry about you. You have taken on so much since your father fell ill. Sometimes I wish you could have a normal life, could find a good man and start a family instead of working yourself to exhaustion trying to keep this ranch going." Emma leaned her head against her mother's shoulder for just a moment, allowing herself the comfort. "Maybe someday," she said, "but right now the ranch needs me. Papa needs me." "Your father would not want you to sacrifice your happiness for this place," her mother said gently. "I am not sacrificing anything," Emma insisted, pulling away. "I love this ranch. It is my home, my future. I cannot imagine living any other way." But even as she said the words, she felt a small pang of doubt. Watching Jacob walk away, she found herself wondering what it might be like to have someone to share the burden with, someone strong and capable who could stand beside her rather than behind her or ahead of her. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. Jacob Grant was here to work, to earn money for his own dream. He would be gone come spring, off to buy his own land and build his own life. There was no point in letting her imagination run wild. Emma spent the morning working with the horses, breaking a young gelding to saddle. It was hard, demanding work that required all her concentration and skill. The horse was spirited and strong, and Emma had to use every trick she had learned to earn its trust and respect. By noon, she was covered in dust and sweat, her arms aching from holding the reins, but the gelding was accepting the saddle and responding to basic commands. She was just leading the horse back to the corral when she saw Jacob and Walt returning from the south pasture for the midday meal. Jacob had removed his shirt in the heat, and Emma nearly tripped over her own feet at the sight of him. His torso was a sculpture of muscle and sinew, his skin bronzed by years of outdoor living. Old scars marked his flesh here and there, testament to a life lived hard and on the edge, but they only added to his rugged appeal. He saw her staring and quickly reached for his shirt, pulling it back on with a sheepish expression. "Sorry, Miss Adelaide, it got mighty hot out there." "No need to apologize," Emma managed, grateful that her own sun-flushed face would hide her blush. "You have a right to be comfortable while you're working." They walked together toward the house, an oddly companionable silence falling between them. Emma was hyper-aware of his presence beside her, of the way his long strides matched her own, of the clean smell of him despite the hard morning's work. "That was some fine horsemanship you were displaying," Jacob said after a moment. "I was watching while we worked on the fence. You have got a real gift with animals." "My father taught me," Emma said, pleased by the compliment. "He always said that horses are like people. They respond better to respect and patience than to force and fear." "Wise man," Jacob observed. "I have known a lot of cowboys who could learn that lesson." They reached the house, where Margaret had laid out a cold lunch of bread, cheese, and sliced beef. The men ate with the single-minded focus of people who burned calories faster than they could replace them. Emma found herself watching Jacob, noting the way he ate with neat efficiency, the way he thanked her mother sincerely for the food, the way he listened attentively when Walt told a long, rambling story about a cattle drive 20 years ago. He fit in, she realized. Despite his years in the wilderness, despite his size and wild appearance, Jacob Grant had a natural ease with people. He knew when to speak and when to listen, when to offer help and when to let others work things out themselves. It was a rare quality, and Emma found herself appreciating it more with each passing hour. After lunch, Emma assigned Jacob to work with Henry in the north pasture, checking water levels and clearing debris from the creek. She had her own work to attend to, bookkeeping and correspondence that she'd been putting off for too long. But she found it hard to concentrate on numbers and letters when her mind kept wandering to the new ranch hand. It was ridiculous, she told herself sternly. She barely knew the man. He had been here less than 24 hours. There was no reason for her to be so distracted, so aware of him. And yet, she could not deny the pull she felt, the magnetic attraction that seemed to draw her thoughts back to him again and again. She was still struggling with the ledgers when she heard a commotion outside. Jumping up from the desk, she ran to the window and felt her heart leap into her throat. One of their bulls had gotten loose and was charging across the yard, head lowered, bellowing with rage, and standing directly in its path was Jacob. Emma did not think. She grabbed the rifle from beside the door and raced outside, but she was too far away to get a clear shot. She watched in horror as the bull charged, certain she was about to witness a terrible tragedy. But Jacob did not run. He stood his ground, and at the last possible second, he sidestepped with fluid grace. As the bull thundered past, Jacob grabbed its horns, using the animal's own momentum to twist its head and bring it crashing to the ground. The bull went down hard, stunned by the fall, and Jacob immediately pressed his knee into its neck, holding it in place with his sheer strength and weight. "Someone get a rope!" he shouted, his voice strained but controlled. Walt came running with a lariat, and together they secured the bull. It took 3 men and 10 minutes of careful work to get the animal back into its pen and the damaged fence repaired. Through it all, Jacob remained calm and focused, directing the others with the easy authority of someone accustomed to handling dangerous situations. When it was finally over, Emma approached him on shaking legs. "That was the most foolish, brave thing I have ever seen," she said, her voice trembling with the aftershock of fear. "You could have been killed." Jacob wiped sweat from his forehead, breathing hard but grinning. "I have wrestled bears, Miss Adelaide. A bull was not going to be my downfall." "You have wrestled bears?" Emma asked incredulously. "Once," Jacob admitted, "and it was not by choice, but that is a story for another time." His expression sobered as he looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the tears that had gathered in her eyes. "Hey, I'm all right. No harm done." "You do not understand," Emma said, brushing angrily at her eyes. "We cannot afford to lose anyone else. This ranch, my family, we are barely holding on as it is. If you had been hurt or killed, it would have been my fault for bringing you here." Jacob reached out and gently caught her hand. His palm was rough and calloused, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. "Emma," he said, using her first name for the first time, and the sound of it on his lips made her shiver. "I chose to be here. And I chose to stop that bull because it was the right thing to do. You are not responsible for my choices or my safety. Do you understand?" Emma looked up at him, at the sincerity in his storm-gray eyes, and felt something crack open inside her chest. "I am not used to people helping me," she admitted quietly. "I have been taking care of everything and everyone for so long, I have forgotten what it feels like to have someone else be strong." "Then maybe it is time you remembered," Jacob said softly. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a small gesture that sent electricity racing up her arm. "You do not have to carry everything alone, Emma. That is what you hired me for, is it not? To help shoulder the burden?" "I hired you to fix fences and work cattle," Emma said, but there was no conviction in her voice. Jacob smiled, and it transformed his rugged face into something beautiful. "Well, I can do that too." They stood there in the dusty yard, hands clasped, eyes locked, and Emma felt the world shift beneath her feet. This was more than attraction, more than simple appreciation. This was the beginning of something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. The sound of her mother calling from the house broke the moment. Emma pulled her hand free, suddenly self-conscious. "I should go," she said. "Thank you, Jacob, for stopping the bull, for being here." "Any time," Jacob said, and the promise in his voice felt like it extended far beyond ranch work. Emma walked back to the house on trembling legs, intensely aware of Jacob's gaze following her. When she glanced back, he was still standing there, watching her with an expression she could not quite read but that made her heart beat faster. This was dangerous, she thought. This feeling, this pull between them. She had a ranch to run, a family to care for, responsibilities that could not be set aside for romantic fancy. And Jacob had his own dreams, his own plans for the future that did not include tying himself to a struggling ranch in New Mexico. But as the days passed and September heat gave way to cooler autumn air, Emma found it increasingly difficult to maintain the distance she knew she should keep. Jacob was everywhere, his presence becoming as much a part of the ranch as the land itself. He was up before dawn and worked until after dusk, never complaining, always ready to tackle whatever task needed doing. But more than that, he was kind and patient, quick with a joke or a word of encouragement, equally comfortable talking with Walt and Henry about cattle or sitting quietly with Emma's father, playing chess and listening to stories of the old days. Emma's mother gradually warmed to him, won over by his unfailing politeness and the genuine care he showed for the family. And Emma herself found 1,000 excuses to be near him, to work alongside him, to seek his opinion on ranch decisions. They fell into a rhythm, a partnership that felt natural and right. Jacob deferred to Emma's knowledge of the ranch and its operations, but he also offered insights and suggestions that came from his years of living close to the land. Together, they accomplished more than Emma had thought possible, repairing years of accumulated damage and neglect. But it was the small moments that truly drew them together. The way Jacob would appear with a cup of coffee just when Emma needed it most. The way Emma would notice Jacob favored his left shoulder after a hard day and would casually mention the liniment in the barn that worked wonders on sore muscles. The way they could work side by side for hours without speaking, communicating through gesture and glance with an ease that usually took years to develop. And then there were the evenings. After supper, when the work was done and the stars were coming out, Emma would often climb her favorite tree to watch the sunset and think. And increasingly, she would find Jacob standing at the base of the tree, looking up at her with that half-smile that made her stomach flutter. "Mind if I join you?" he asked one evening in late September, the air finally cool enough to be comfortable. Emma's heart leaped. "You climb trees?" "I have climbed mountains," Jacob pointed out. "A tree should not be too much of a challenge." He swung up into the branches with surprising grace for someone his size, moving with the confidence of someone who trusted his strength and balance. Emma watched, fascinated, as he navigated the limbs and settled onto the branch beside her. It dipped slightly under his weight, and Emma had to adjust her position. They ended up sitting closer than was strictly proper, their shoulders nearly touching. I can see why you like it up here, Jacob said, gazing out over the ranch. The setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and crimson, and the mountains in the distance looked like dark waves frozen against the sky. It is beautiful. It is my favorite place on the ranch, Emma admitted. When I was a girl, I would climb up here to escape my chores, to dream about the future. My mother would call and call, but I would just stay hidden in the branches until she gave up. Jacob laughed, the sound rich and warm. I can picture that. A little wild thing with scraped knees and leaves in her hair. That is fairly accurate, Emma said with a smile. I was not a very good daughter by conventional standards. I wanted to ride and rope and explore, not learn embroidery and how to set a proper table. Your parents must have been disappointed. Emma shook her head. Papa understood. He never had a son, and I think he was secretly pleased that I took such an interest in the ranch. Mama tried to civilize me, but her heart was not really in it. She knew the ranch would need someone strong to run it someday, and that someone turned out to be me. You do a good job, Jacob said seriously. This place would have fallen apart without you. Emma felt warmth spread through her chest at the praise. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. Why from me specifically? Because you have built a life on your own, survived things most people could not imagine. You understand what it takes to keep going when everything seems stacked against you. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. I do know about that, he said finally. But I will tell you something, Emma. All those years in the mountains, living alone, being self-sufficient, I thought that was what I wanted, what I needed. But I was wrong. A man is not meant to be alone. He is meant to build something, to share his life with someone, to be part of something bigger than himself. Emma's breath caught. Is that why you came down from the mountains? Part of it, Jacob admitted. He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her dizzy. But the real reason I'm glad I came down, the reason I'm grateful I found this particular ranch in this particular corner of New Mexico, that is sitting right beside me. Emma's heart hammered so hard she was certain he could hear it. Jacob, she whispered, not sure what she was asking for or offering. He reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. I know I've only been here a few weeks, he said quietly. I know I have no right to say this, to feel this way. But Emma, from the moment I saw you up in this tree, looking like some kind of wild spirit of the desert, I have not been able to think of anything else. You are strong and smart and beautiful, and you care so deeply about this land and your family. And I find myself wanting things I had not let myself want in years. What things? Emma asked, though she thought she knew, hoped she knew. Jacob's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, the gesture unbearably tender. A home, he said. A partner. A future that is not just about survival, but about building something real and lasting with someone I care about. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the honesty and vulnerability in his words. I care about you too, she confessed, more than I should, more than is sensible. You have only been here such a short time, and you have plans of your own, dreams you have been working toward for years. I have no right to ask you to change those plans. What if I want to change them? Jacob asked. What if I have found something here that is more important than any piece of land I could buy? Jacob, I do not know what to say. Say you will give me a chance, Jacob said. Give us a chance. Let me court you properly. Let me prove that I am worthy of you. And if at the end of it you decide I am not the man for you, I will respect that and leave come spring just as I planned. But Emma, please, just give me a chance. Emma looked into his eyes, at the hope and fear and longing she saw there, and felt her own careful defenses crumble. She had been strong for so long, had carried so much on her shoulders, had convinced herself she did not need or want anyone to share her burden. But Jacob was not offering to take over, not suggesting she was weak or incapable. He was offering partnership, companionship, the chance to build something together. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Jacob, you can court me. The smile that broke across his face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He cupped her face in both his large hands, his touch reverent, and leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Emma did not pull away. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, she felt something inside her that had been locked away for years finally break free. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning the shape and taste of each other. But it deepened quickly, fueled by weeks of tension and attraction and longing. Jacob's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Emma melted into his strength, into the solid reality of him. She felt safe and desired and cherished all at once, and it was overwhelming and perfect. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that since the day I met you," he admitted. "I am glad you waited until now," Emma said with a shaky laugh. "I might not have believed you if you had kissed me that first day." "Believed what?" "That you meant it, that it was not just about convenience or opportunity. I needed time to see who you really are." "And who am I?" Jacob asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. Emma pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "You are a good man, Jacob Grant. A strong man, a kind man, a man who keeps his word and works hard and treats people with respect. You are the kind of man I could build a life with." Jacob's arms tightened around her. "Then let us build that life, Emma, starting right now, right here in this tree where everything began." Emma laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "That seems appropriate." They sat together in the cottonwood as the sun set and the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing. Jacob told her stories of his time in the mountains, of close calls with bears and mountain lions, of winter storms that buried his cabin under 10 feet of snow, of the profound silence and beauty of the high country. Emma told him about growing up on the ranch, about watching her father slowly succumb to illness, about the fears and doubts that plagued her in the darkest hours of the night when she wondered if she was strong enough to keep everything together. "You are more than strong enough," Jacob assured her. "But you do not have to be strong alone anymore. That is what I'm here for." "You are here because I hired you to fix fences," Emma pointed out teasingly. "I am here because fate brought me to this ranch at exactly the right moment," Jacob countered. "And I am not leaving, Emma. Not in the spring, not ever, if you will have me." Emma's heart swelled with emotion so intense it was almost painful. "What about your plans to buy land?" "I'm looking at the land I want," Jacob said simply. "This ranch, this family, you, that is my future, if you will share it with me." Emma kissed him again in answer, pouring all her hope and fear and love into the gesture. And as they sat together under the vast New Mexico sky, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. But of course, life on a ranch in 1878 was never that simple. The trouble started in early October when a group of drifters came through Deming looking for work. Times were hard, and there were plenty of men willing to do anything for a few dollars and a hot meal. Most of them were harmless, just down on their luck. But some, as Emma and Jacob were about to discover, were more dangerous. Emma was in town one afternoon, picking up supplies and checking on a horse she had sold to the blacksmith, when 3 men approached her outside the general store. They were rough-looking, unwashed and unshaven, with eyes that made her skin crawl. "Excuse me, miss," the tallest one said, though there was nothing polite about his tone or the way he looked at her. "We heard you might be hiring out at the Adelaide ranch." "We have all the help we need at the moment," Emma said coolly, trying to step around them. The man moved to block her path. "That is unfriendly. Here we are, willing to work hard for fair pay, and you are turning us away without even giving us a chance." "I said we do not need anyone," Emma repeated, her hand moving toward the gun she wore at her hip. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 10, and she never went to town unarmed. One of the other men laughed unpleasantly. "Look at her, thinking she is some kind of gunfighter. That is what happens when you let women wear pants and carry weapons. They forget their place." Emma felt anger flare hot in her chest, but before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension like a knife. "The lady said she does not need your services." Jacob appeared at Emma's side, and the change in his demeanor was startling. Gone was the gentleman who climbed trees and played chess with her father. In his place was something harder, more dangerous, a mountain man who had survived years in the wilderness through strength and will. His hand rested casually on his own gun, and there was no warmth in his storm-gray eyes. The 3 drifters reassessed the situation quickly. Jacob was bigger than all of them, and there was something in his stance that spoke of capability and willingness to use violence if necessary. The tall man held up his hands in mock surrender. "No offense meant, friend. We were just asking about work." "And you got your answer," Jacob said flatly. "Now move along." The men backed off, but not before the tall one shot Emma a look that promised the conversation was not over. Emma felt a chill run down her spine, but she lifted her chin and met his gaze steadily until he finally turned and walked away. Jacob waited until they were out of sight before turning to Emma. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Emma said, though her hands were shaking slightly. "Thank you for intervening, though I could have handled it myself." "I know you could have," Jacob said seriously. "But that does not mean you should have to. Those men were looking for trouble, Emma. I could see it in their eyes. We need to be careful." Emma nodded, the reality of the situation settling over her. "You think they will cause problems?" "I think men like that always cause problems when they do not get what they want. We should let the sheriff know they are in the area." They found Sheriff Tom Weston at his office, a small adobe building next to the town saloon. Weston was a competent lawman, but he was only one man trying to keep peace in a growing territory, and his resources were limited. "I appreciate you letting me know," he said after Emma described the encounter. "But unless they actually do something illegal, there's not much I can do. Best advice I can give is to keep your eyes open and your guns close." It was not reassuring, but it was honest. Emma and Jacob loaded their supplies into the wagon and headed back to the ranch, both of them watchful and tense. The encounter had shattered the bubble of happiness they had been living in, reminding them that the world was not always safe or kind. Over the next few days, Jacob increased security around the ranch. He reinforced the locks on the barn and bunkhouse, made sure everyone was armed when they went out to work the cattle, and set up a watch system at night. Walt and Henry grumbled about the extra precautions, but followed his lead. "You really think those drifters will come back?" Henry asked one evening. "I hope not," Jacob said, "but hope is not a strategy. Better to be prepared and not need it than the other way around." Emma appreciated Jacob's diligence, but she could not shake the feeling that something bad was coming. Her instincts, honed by years of living on the edge of the wilderness, were screaming at her to be careful. She was proven right 3 nights later. Emma woke to the smell of smoke. She bolted out of bed, heart pounding, and looked out her window to see flames licking at the side of the barn. She did not waste time thinking. She grabbed her boots and ran outside, screaming for help. Jacob was already there, along with Walt and Henry, fighting the fire with buckets of water from the well. The horses were panicking in their stalls, and Emma could hear their terrified screams. Without hesitation, she ran into the burning barn. "Emma, no!" Jacob shouted, but she was already inside. The smoke was thick and choking, the heat intense. Emma pulled her shirt up over her nose and mouth and ran to the stalls, throwing them open one by one. The horses needed no encouragement to flee, thundering past her toward safety. She had freed 4 of them when a burning beam crashed down in front of her, blocking the path to the remaining 2 stalls. Emma looked around frantically, her eyes streaming from the smoke. There had to be another way. She grabbed a horse blanket and beat at the flames, trying to create a gap she could slip through. The fire fought back, hungry and relentless. Then Jacob was there, lifting the burning beam with his bare hands and tossing it aside as if it weighed nothing. His face was a mask of fury and fear. "Get out!" he roared at Emma. "I will get the horses!" Emma did not argue. She ran for the door, coughing and gasping, and burst into the cool night air. Her lungs burned, and her eyes felt like they were on fire, but she turned back immediately, counting the horses that had escaped. 4. Jacob needed to get 2 more. An eternity seemed to pass before Jacob appeared, leading the last 2 horses. His hands were burned, his hair singed, but he was alive. Emma ran to him, throwing her arms around him in relief and terror. "Never do that again," she gasped against his chest. "Never." "I could say the same to you," Jacob said roughly, holding her tight. "What were you thinking, running into a burning building?" "I was thinking about saving the horses," Emma said. "The same as you." Jacob pulled back just enough to look at her, his face smudged with soot, his eyes blazing with emotion. "Emma Adelaide, you are going to be the death of me." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Emma retorted. The fire was finally under control, though a good portion of the barn was destroyed. As dawn broke, They surveyed the damage and found what they had feared. The fire had been deliberately set. There were oil-soaked rags near where the flames had started, and signs that someone had cut through the lock on the barn door. "Those drifters," Emma said flatly. "Probably," Jacob agreed, his expression grim. "This was a warning, Emma. They are trying to intimidate you, to make you afraid." "Then they failed," Emma said fiercely. "I am not afraid. I'm angry." Jacob allowed himself a small smile despite the circumstances. "That is my girl." They reported the arson to Sheriff Weston, who promised to look into it, but Emma held little hope that anything would come of it. The drifters were likely long gone, at least for now, but she knew they would be back. Men like that did not give up easily. The next few weeks were tense. They rebuilt the barn, working long hours to get it finished before winter set in. Jacob barely left Emma's side, his protective instincts in full force. It was both comforting and frustrating. Emma appreciated his concern, but she was not used to being watched over so carefully. "I'm not made of glass," she told him one afternoon when he insisted on accompanying her to check the north pasture fence line. "I have been running this ranch on my own for 3 years." "I know that," Jacob said patiently, "but you have never had enemies before, not like this. These men are dangerous, Emma. They have already proven they are willing to commit violence. I am not going to let them hurt you." Emma softened at the raw concern in his voice. "I do not want you to get hurt either," she said quietly. "If something happened to you because of me, because of this ranch, I could not bear it." Jacob stopped walking and turned to face her. "Nothing is going to happen to me, and nothing is going to happen to you. I swear it, Emma. I will keep you safe." Emma stepped into his arms, resting her head against his chest. She could hear his heart beating strong and steady, could feel the solid strength of him. "We will keep each other safe," she corrected. "Deal," Jacob said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. That night, Emma climbed her favorite tree to think. The cottonwood had become their place, the spot where she and Jacob met in the evenings to talk and dream. She was sitting on her usual branch, watching the stars come out, when she heard someone climbing up behind her. But it was not Jacob. Emma turned, alarm shooting through her, and found herself face to face with the tall drifter from town. He had a knife in his hand and a nasty smile on his face. "Evening, miss," he said. "You and I need to have a conversation." Emma's gun was in her belt, but before she could reach for it, the man lunged forward, the knife flashing in the starlight. Emma threw herself backward, and for one terrifying moment she was falling, branches whipping past her, the ground rushing up. She hit hard, all the air slamming out of her lungs. Pain exploded through her body and the world went gray at the edges. Through the haze, she heard shouting, heard Jacob's voice raised in fury. Then everything went black. When Emma woke, she was in her own bed, and Jacob was sitting beside her, holding her hand. His face was haggard, his eyes red-rimmed as if he had been crying or had not slept in days. When he saw her eyes open, relief flooded his features so intensely it was almost painful to witness. "Emma," he breathed. "Thank God." "What happened?" Emma croaked, her throat raw. "You fell from the tree," Jacob said, his voice rough with emotion. "That drifter, he was up there with you. I saw him climbing and came running, but I was not fast enough to stop him from attacking you. You fell 20 feet, Emma. 20 feet. Emma tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through her ribs. Jacob gently pushed her back down. "Do not move. The doctor says you have 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and more bruises than he could count. You are lucky to be alive." "The drifter?" Emma asked. Jacob's expression went hard and cold. "I took care of him. He will not be bothering you or anyone else again." Emma heard what he was not saying, saw it in the set of his shoulders, the tight line of his mouth. "Jacob, what did you do?" "What I had to," Jacob said flatly. "He tried to kill you, Emma. He climbed that tree with murder in his heart, and I was not going to let him get away with it." Emma reached up with her free hand and touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. "Thank you," she whispered, "for protecting me." Jacob's eyes closed, and he leaned into her touch. "I almost lost you," he said hoarsely. "I saw you fall, saw you hit the ground, and I thought you were dead. Emma, I cannot lose you. I cannot." "You have not lost me," Emma assured him. "I am right here." Jacob opened his eyes, and the raw emotion she saw there made her chest tighten. "Marry me," he said suddenly. "I know we have only been courting for a few weeks. I know this is fast, but Emma, life is too short and too uncertain. I love you. I have loved you from the moment I saw you in that tree, and I want to spend whatever time I have left on this earth by your side. Marry me." Emma felt tears stream down her face, tears of pain and joy and overwhelming love. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Jacob, I will marry you." Jacob let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and carefully, so carefully, leaned down to kiss her. It was the gentlest kiss they had shared, tender and reverent, a promise and a prayer. "I will make you happy," Jacob vowed. "I swear to you, Emma, I will spend every day of the rest of my life making you happy." "You already do," Emma said, "just by being here, by being you." Over the next 2 weeks, Emma healed slowly under Jacob's watchful care. He barely left her side, reading to her when she was bored, helping her walk when she was ready to try moving around, sitting with her in comfortable silence when she was too tired for conversation. Her parents approved of the engagement wholeheartedly. Her father, in particular, seemed to regain some of his strength and vitality, pleased that his daughter had found a good man and that the ranch would have a strong leader when he was gone. The wedding was planned for early November, a small ceremony with just family and close friends. Emma's mother threw herself into preparations with enthusiasm, grateful to have something happy to focus on. Walt and Henry were thrilled, treating Jacob like a brother and Emma like a queen. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cool, perfect autumn weather. Emma wore a simple white dress that had belonged to her grandmother, her hair braided with wildflowers that Jacob had picked himself. Jacob wore new clothes that he had bought in town, looking almost uncomfortable in the unfamiliar formality, but devastatingly handsome. They were married in the yard under the cottonwood tree, where they had first kissed, where they had fallen in love. The local pastor performed the ceremony, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Jacob kissed Emma with such tender passion that everyone present felt privileged to witness it. The celebration afterward was joyful and simple, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. Emma's father managed to dance one slow turn with his daughter before his strength gave out, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I'm so proud of you," he told Emma, "so proud of the woman you have become, the life you have built. You have a good man there, daughter. Take care of each other." "We will, Papa," Emma promised, holding him tight. That night, Emma and Jacob retired to the small cabin that had once served as guest quarters, but that they had fixed up as their new home. It was not large, but it was theirs, a space they could build a life together. Jacob carried Emma over the threshold despite her protests that her ribs were healed enough that she could walk. "Humor me," he said with a grin. "It is tradition." Inside, he set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Emma Grant," he said softly. "I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you climb trees like a wild thing. I love how much you care about this ranch and your family. I love everything about you, and I am the luckiest man alive to call you my wife." "I love you too," Emma said, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "I never thought I would find someone who understood me, who saw me as I am and loved me anyway. But you do, Jacob. You see all of me, and you love me anyway." "Not anyway," Jacob corrected. "I love you because of who you are, not in spite of it." They made love that night with the tenderness of newlyweds and the passion of people who had nearly lost each other. And afterward, lying in Jacob's arms, Emma felt a peace and contentment she had never known before. This was what she had been missing, she realized, not just companionship or help with the ranch, but partnership, true and equal. Someone to stand beside her through whatever challenges life brought. The next few months were perhaps the happiest of Emma's life. Winter came to New Mexico, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional rain. The ranch thrived under the joint management of Emma and Jacob, their complementary skills and knowledge making them a formidable team. Jacob's strength and outdoor expertise combined perfectly with Emma's understanding of the land and the cattle business. They worked side by side during the day, and in the evenings they would often climb the cottonwood tree together, sitting in the branches and watching the sunset, talking about their plans and dreams. Jacob officially became part owner of the ranch when Emma's father signed over half his interest, recognizing that his daughter and son-in-law were the future of the Adelaide land. In January, Emma's father passed away peacefully in his sleep. It was a loss that hit the whole family hard, but there was comfort in knowing that he had lived to see his daughter happily married and the ranch secure. They buried him on a hill overlooking the property he had spent his life building, and Jacob stood beside Emma throughout the funeral, a silent pillar of strength. "He was proud of you," Jacob told Emma that night as they lay in bed. "He told me so just a few days before he died. He said he could not have asked for a better daughter or a better son-in-law." Emma cried then, letting out the grief she had been holding back, and Jacob held her through it, offering the comfort of his presence and his love. Life went on, as it always does. Spring came, bringing new calves and the hard work of branding and moving the herd to fresh pasture. Emma discovered she was pregnant in April, and Jacob's joy was almost comical. He became even more protective, hovering over her until she threatened to hit him with a shovel if he did not give her some space. "I am having a baby, not dying," she told him exasperatedly. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "But you are my wife," Jacob protested, "and that is my child. I am allowed to worry." Emma softened, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "Worry if you must," she said, "but also trust me. I am strong, and I can handle this." "I know you are strong," Jacob said seriously. "That is one of the many reasons I love you." Their son was born in December of 1879, a healthy baby with a good set of lungs and his father's dark hair. They named him Frank, after Emma's father, and Jacob cried when he held his son for the first time, overcome with emotion. "He is perfect," Jacob said in wonder. "Emma, he is absolutely perfect." Emma, exhausted but happy, smiled at her husband. "He looks like you." "Poor kid," Jacob joked, but there was such love in his eyes that Emma felt tears prick her own. Life settled into a new rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper, and they eventually bought more land, expanding the Adelaide holdings significantly. Jacob proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching young Frank to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk. 2 years after Frank was born, they had a daughter, Margaret, named for Emma's mother. She was a fiery child with her mother's blonde hair and green eyes, and she took to climbing trees as naturally as breathing. Jacob would often come home to find his daughter perched 30 feet up in the cottonwood, with Emma sitting on a branch beside her. "Like mother, like daughter," he would say with a laugh. More children followed over the years. Another son, James, and then twin girls, Sarah and Rebecca. The cabin became too small, so they built a larger house, a beautiful adobe structure with wide porches and plenty of room for their growing family. Emma's mother lived with them until she passed peacefully at the age of 72, having had the joy of seeing all her grandchildren grow. Walt and Henry both eventually retired, spending their final years in comfortable cottages on the ranch property, still offering advice and wisdom when asked. As the years passed and the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Emma and Jacob watched their children grow and start families of their own. Frank took over the daily operations of the ranch, showing the same dedication and love for the land that his parents had. Margaret married a school teacher and moved to Santa Fe, though she visited often. James became a veterinarian, using his skills to help not just the Adelaide ranch, but ranches throughout the territory. The twins both married local boys and settled nearby, filling Emma and Jacob's later years with grandchildren. Through it all, Emma and Jacob remained as devoted to each other as they had been in those early days. Age might have slowed their bodies and silvered their hair, but it never diminished their love. They still climbed the cottonwood tree together, though they did not go quite as high as they once had, and they still sat together watching the sunset, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, Jacob stood and raised his glass in a toast. "Fathihi." 50 years ago, he said, his voice still strong despite his 74 years. "I was a lonely mountain man who thought he knew what he wanted out of life. I was going to buy some land, build a cabin, live out my days in solitude. And then I saw a woman up in a tree, moving through the branches like she owned the sky, and everything changed. Emma Adelaide was the girl who climbed trees like a boy, and I was the mountain man who climbed up and asked her to marry me. Best decision I ever made." Emma, sitting beside him with tears streaming down her face, stood and kissed her husband to the cheers and applause of their family. Best decision I ever made, too, she said. I love you, Jacob Grant. I always have and I always will. And I love you, Emma Grant, Jacob replied, forever and always. They sat back down, hands clasped, surrounded by the legacy they had built together. The ranch spread out around them, thousands of acres of land that would pass down through generations. The cottonwood tree still stood tall and proud, a silent witness to their love story. As the sun set that evening, painting the New Mexico sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson, Emma rested her head on Jacob's shoulder and reflected on the journey they had taken together. From that first meeting in 1878, when a mountain man had walked onto her ranch and into her heart, to this moment 50 years later, surrounded by the life they had created together, it had been a wild, wonderful adventure. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Giving up your plans? Staying here instead of buying your own land? Jacob turned to look at her, his storm-gray eyes still as clear and intense as they had been in his youth. This is my land, he said simply. You are my land, our children, our grandchildren, this ranch we built together. I did not give up anything, Emma. I gained everything. Emma smiled, feeling that familiar flutter in her chest that Jacob had always inspired. That's a good answer. It is the truth, Jacob said. He leaned down and kissed her, a gentle press of lips that still made her heart race even after 50 years. As night fell and the stars came out, the family gradually dispersed to their own homes and rooms. Emma and Jacob remained on the porch, unwilling to let the day end just yet. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft nicker of horses, the whisper of wind through the cottonwood tree. We did good, did we not? Emma asked. We did great, Jacob corrected. We built a life, Emma, a real, solid, beautiful life. Not many people can say that. No, Emma agreed. Not many can. They sat together under the vast New Mexico sky, the same sky that had watched over them for 50 years and felt the weight and wonder of their journey. From a girl who climbed trees and a mountain man who dared to follow, to partners who built an empire, to lovers who never stopped choosing each other, to elders who could look back on a life well lived and love well shared. As they finally rose to go to bed, Jacob swept Emma up in his arms despite their combined ages, making her laugh and protest. Jacob Grant, put me down. We are much too old for this nonsense. Never too old, Jacob said firmly, carrying her across the threshold of their home, just as he had on their wedding night 50 years ago. Some traditions are worth keeping. Inside, he set her down gently and took both her hands in his. Thank you, he said softly, for taking a chance on a wild mountain man, for building this life with me, for 50 years of love and partnership and adventure. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Emma. Emma squeezed his hands, her eyes bright with tears. And you are the best thing that ever happened to me. I love you, Jacob. Today, tomorrow, and for whatever time we have left. Forever, Jacob said. I will love you forever. They went to bed that night as they had every night for 50 years, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for the gift of love and partnership and a life built together under the wide New Mexico sky. Several more peaceful years passed on the Adelaide ranch, each one adding new memories and deepening the legacy that Emma and Jacob had built. They watched with pride as their grandchildren grew and thrived, many of them showing the same fierce independence and love for the land that had defined their grandmother. When Emma was 76 years old, she still insisted on climbing her beloved cottonwood tree, though she did not go nearly as high as she once had. Jacob, at 78, still climbed up beside her, his movements slower, but his determination undiminished. They would sit together on the lower branches, holding hands and watching the world they had shaped and nurtured. One evening in late summer, as they sat in their tree with the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant colors, Emma turned to Jacob with a contented smile. Do you remember the first time you climbed up here with me? She asked. Of course, Jacob said. September of 1878. You were surprised that a mountain man could climb trees. Emma laughed, the sound rich with memory and affection. And you said you had climbed mountains, so a tree should not be too much of a challenge. I was showing off, Jacob admitted with a grin, trying to impress a beautiful woman. It worked, Emma said, leaning her head on his shoulder. I fell in love with you that night, Jacob. Really, truly in love. I fell in love with you the moment I saw you up in this tree, Jacob said. A wild, fearless woman who did not care what anyone thought, who ran her ranch with intelligence and strength, who was not afraid to climb high and see the world from a different perspective. How could I not fall in love with you? They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars appeared. The ranch around them was quiet, peaceful, prosperous. Their children and grandchildren were happy and healthy. The land would continue through the generations, a testament to everything they had built together. It has been a good life, Emma said softly. The best life, Jacob agreed. No regrets, Emma, not a single one. No regrets, Emma echoed. As they climbed down from the tree together, helping each other navigate the branches with the ease of long practice, Emma reflected on how perfectly her life had turned out. She had been the girl who climbed trees like a boy, unconventional and wild, and she had found a mountain man who loved her exactly as she was. Together, they had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love and hard work and partnership. That night, lying in bed with Jacob's arms around her, Emma felt a profound sense of peace and completion. She had lived fully, loved deeply, and created something meaningful. What more could anyone ask for? Jacob, as if reading her thoughts, tightened his embrace. Sweet dreams, my love, he murmured. I will be right here when you wake up. Always. Me, always, Emma whispered back. The years continued to pass, gentle and full of joy. Emma and Jacob eventually became great-great-grandparents, watching with wonder as yet another generation joined the family they had started so many years ago. They remained active on the ranch for as long as their bodies allowed, offering guidance and wisdom to their descendants, but trusting them to carry on the traditions and values they had established. On a warm afternoon in the spring of Emma's 82nd year, she and Jacob celebrated their 62nd wedding anniversary with a small gathering of their immediate family. They sat together on the porch of the house they had built, surrounded by children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren, a living testament to the love they shared. Frank, now in his 60s and still running the ranch with the help of his own children and grandchildren, stood to make a toast. Mama, Papa, he said, his voice thick with emotion, you have given us all an incredible gift. Not just this ranch, not just the security and prosperity you have built, but the example of your love. 62 years of marriage, of partnership, of choosing each other every single day. That is rare and precious, and we are all better for having witnessed it. Thank you for showing us what true love looks like. The whole family raised their glasses, and Emma felt tears stream down her face. Jacob, sitting beside her with his arm around her shoulders, kissed the top of her head. We are the lucky ones, he said quietly, so only she could hear. To have found each other, to have had this life together. We are the lucky ones, Emma. Yes, Emma agreed, looking out at the sea of faces, all connected to them, all part of the story they had written together. We are. As the celebration continued around them, Emma and Jacob slipped away for a few moments of quiet. They walked slowly to the cottonwood tree, the same tree that had been the backdrop for so much of their love story. Its branches were thick and full, casting dappled shadows on the ground. The tree had weathered storms and droughts and the passing of seasons, growing stronger and more magnificent with each passing year, much like their love. Do you think we could still climb it? Emma asked with a mischievous smile. Jacob laughed, the sound still able to make Emma's heart skip a beat even after more than 60 years. I think we might break our necks trying, but it's a nice thought. They stood together at the base of the tree, hands clasped, remembering all the moments they had shared here. First kisses, difficult conversations, moments of joy and sorrow, proposals and promises. This tree had been witness to it all. Thank you, Emma said suddenly. For what? Jacob asked. For climbing up and asking me to marry you. For seeing me, the real me, and loving what you saw. For building this life with me. For being my partner and my love for all these years. For everything, Jacob. Thank you for everything. Jacob turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Even at 84 years old, even with the ravages of time marking his face and body, he was still the most handsome man Emma had ever seen. His eyes still held that storm-gray intensity, that depth of feeling that had captured her heart so many years ago. "Emma Grant," he said seriously, "you have been the joy and purpose of my life. Every day with you has been a gift. Every moment, even the difficult ones, has been worth it because we faced them together. I would climb 1,000 trees, cross 1,000 mountains, live 1,000 lives if it meant finding you again and again." Emma reached up and cupped his weathered face in her hands. "I love you, Jacob Grant. I have loved you for 62 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left and beyond." "Beyond," Jacob agreed. "Our love will outlive us, Emma. It is in this land, in our children, in every generation that comes after us. We built something that will last forever." They stood together under the cottonwood tree as the afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, two people who had lived and loved and built a legacy that would endure. And when they finally walked back to join their family, they did so hand in hand, just as they had done everything else in their remarkable life together. The celebration continued into the evening, filled with laughter and music and stories. As the sun set in a blaze of color, Emma looked around at all the faces she loved, at the ranch that stretched out in every direction, at the life she and Jacob had created from nothing more than courage and love and determination. She caught Jacob's eye across the porch, and he smiled at her, that special smile he reserved just for her. In that moment, Emma felt a completeness that transcended words. This was what happiness looked like. This was what a life well lived felt like. As the stars came out and the family gradually settled in for the night, Emma and Jacob retired to their bedroom. They moved slowly now, bodies aged and worn, but spirits still vibrant and connected. "Another anniversary," Jacob said as they prepared for bed. "Another year of loving you." "And being loved by you," Emma added. "The best gift I could ever ask for." They climbed into bed, arranging themselves in the position they had slept in for decades, Emma's head on Jacob's shoulder, his arm around her, their hands clasped between them. "Good night, my love," Jacob murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Good night," Emma replied. "I love you. I love you too. Always and forever." As sleep claimed them both, they held each other close, two souls who had found their perfect match and had lived a love story for the ages. From a chance meeting in the wild New Mexico territory in 1878 to this moment more than 60 years later, they had built a life of meaning and purpose and enduring love. The cottonwood tree stood sentinel outside their window, its branches rustling softly in the night breeze, keeping watch over the couple who had loved beneath its shade for so many years. And in the distance, the ranch they had built together sprawled across the landscape, a living testament to what could be accomplished when two people joined their strengths and dreams. Emma and Jacob Grant lived several more years, each one adding more memories and more joy to their already rich lives. They remained devoted to each other until the very end, their love never diminishing even as their bodies grew frail. When Jacob passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 88, with Emma holding his hand, it was as if a light had gone out in the world. Emma grieved deeply for her partner, her love, her other half, but she also celebrated the incredible life they had shared, the 66 years of marriage that had been a blessing beyond measure. She lived 2 more years after Jacob's death, spending her days surrounded by family, tending the ranch as much as she was able, and visiting the cottonwood tree where she and Jacob had shared so many precious moments. She often felt his presence there, as if some part of him lingered in the place where their love had first bloomed. When Emma passed away at the age of 86, also peacefully in her sleep, she was buried beside Jacob on the hill overlooking the ranch, under the vast New Mexico sky they had both loved so much. Their headstone bore a simple inscription chosen by their children. She was the girl who climbed trees like a boy. He was the mountain man who climbed up and asked her to marry. Together, they built a legacy of love. And that legacy lived on through the generations that followed, each one carrying forward the values and the love that Emma and Jacob had embodied. The Adelaide Grant Ranch continued to prosper, passed down through their descendants, a thriving reminder of what two people could accomplish when they worked together in love and partnership. The cottonwood tree remained standing for many more years, growing ever larger and more magnificent. Future generations of the family would climb its branches, sit in its shade, and tell stories of Emma and Jacob, keeping their memory alive. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings when the sun was setting and the sky was painted in gold and crimson, those who were paying attention swore they could see two figures sitting in the upper branches, holding hands and watching the world they had created together. It was a love story that transcended time, a tale of two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something beautiful and lasting. From a wild girl who refused to conform to expectations and a mountain man seeking a place to belong, to partners who changed the landscape of New Mexico territory and left a legacy that would endure for generations. They had lived. They had loved. They had built something that mattered. And in the end, that was everything.